new book, The Pause Principle, How to Keep Your Cool in Tough Situations. I'm Rhett Power. My co-host, Cynthia Johnson, is off today, but we are on Bestseller Live, and it is good to be here with you on another Tuesday and Thursday. And so we do this twice a week. Anyway, Cynthia, we've got to dive into your work. I mean, you are a leading voice in mindful communication, founder of the Kane Intentional Communication Institute. Your background, certified mediation, mindfulness instructor, and you've helped over 70,000 people transform their lives and relationships with your teachings. Countless books, a great series on like a Buddhist. I mean, you talked. One of the books was How to Communicate Like a Buddhist, Talk to Yourself Like a Buddhist, and How to Meditate Like a Buddhist. Great series, and I'm excited to talk about your new book that came out in January. So let's do that. The new book is titled The Pause Principle. What exactly is the pause principle, and why is it so powerful in difficult moments?
Yeah. So the pause principle is, we often talk a lot in communication about speaking and listening, but there is this moment before we actually express ourselves. There is a space between the stimulus and the response. And so the pause principle is really taking that moment in a difficult, challenging interaction, finding that space to reset, to gain clarity, and begin to express yourself in a way that you respect. And the pause principle itself is to soften in that moment. Usually in interactions, we have our walls up, we have our protective gear on. It is very easy to move into our default patterns of reacting when we're feeling attacked or threatened in some way. And usually we harden in those moments. And so the principle itself is to actually soften in the moment that we want to potentially, harden or lash out, get passive aggressive. So the book itself is practices to be able to do that in the moment. So the practice itself is called Soften, and there's specific, steps that you take in the heat of the moment to be able to find that rest and digest, so that then you can express yourself in a calm, clear, conscious, and compassionate way.
What's one tip people could take away today before they get a chance to read the book, that you're in the heat of a moment, you're in an argument, you're in a conversation that's heated? How do we make that pause? How do we do that?
Yeah. So I think the biggest piece is starting to pay attention to what's happening in your body. We don't often do that. We pay a lot of attention to our thoughts. And
that is true.
Yeah. So one big piece is in conversation, whether it's a heated conversation or not, starting to pay attention to sensation in the body. In a difficult conversation, we feel discomfort in the body. We can feel our palms start to sweat. We can feel our chest maybe feels tight. Our heart starts beating faster. Our mouth can get dry. Some people feel like, just like a pit in their stomach. For me, it's like intense heat that rises through my face. So we all have a unique, unpleasant sensation. And our practice, if we can get it, like the best tip is just to start paying attention to that discomfort in the body, because when that happens, that's your cue to grab a practice or a tool to help yourself find that rest, find that place of softening and calm, so that then you can turn towards the other person in that moment, see them as somebody that you respect, you want to be helpful towards, and communicate from that place.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but that just reminds me when I was 20 something, and I've been dating this person for a long time, and it was time to either get engaged and go forward or not. I was physically balled over in a knot, because I knew that it wasn't right.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. Like it there's a physical, and I felt that in business too, when things weren't going well with a partner or an employee, and I knew I had to do something. You're absolutely right, and we just don't pay attention to that enough.
We ignore it, or we just kind of push it to the side. But it really is, it's our body communicating to us that we are in a state of discomfort, and there is something that we need to talk to here, or we need to let ourselves know that we're safe in that moment to then be able to reach more connection, right?
I know you've done a lot of breath work. Does breathing help in that moment to sort of calm down?
Yeah. So breathing is one of the practices, and lots of people will say, well, just take a breath, right? And it's such a easy thing to think to do, but it's really challenging to do in the moment. So I liken it more to, you're doing more of a breath pattern. So you feel that sensation, that unpleasant sensation, and then you would inhale for 5, hold for 5, exhale for 5, and then you're pretty much good to go,
Okay. Yeah. How did your journey into mindfulness and Buddhist inspired communication begin? What was your journey there for this?
Yeah. I mean, I came into this in a really unexpected way. I was very passive aggressive, very judgmental, very anxious, and I had a very challenging time in silence or being able to express myself and articulate. And I didn't necessarily know that at the time, right? But communicating had always been something that was quite hard for me to do. And I had been with my first love since we were 18. We had been together for about 8 years, and we had separated and then thought, okay, the universe will bring us back together when we're ready to come back together. And the universe brought us back together. And then 4 months later, he passed away unexpectedly. Sorry. And he was kayaking down a river in Costa Rica, and he got caught in a swell. And my whole world went blank at that point. Everything shifted for me in that moment. And I remember I was living in New York at the time, and really I remember lying on the floor, surrounded by tissues, just wanting anybody and anything to help me out of this. And as much as people were trying to help, it just wasn't doing anything. And it was that moment I realized that I needed to really figure this out on my own. And so that's when I started, reading a lot of books, going to seminars, taking classes, and a friend of mine recommended a meditation and writing workshop at the Shambhala Institute when I lived in New York. And I didn't know anything about Buddhism, really. I had never meditated before. And I went that weekend, and that weekend, it changed my life, in the sense that it was the first time that I was able to sit with everything that I was feeling without judging it or trying to push it away. But I was really allowing myself to be as I was in that moment, feeling extreme loss and grief and anxiety, and at the same time, so much gratitude and feeling like the love of the world at the same time, being able to hold both of those things. And then that's where I learned the elements of right speech in Buddhism, which are to tell the truth, don't exaggerate, use helpful language, and don't gossip. And I realized this was kind of my aha moment, because I had been through all the research or the classes and the books that I was reading. I was noticing that if I wanted to change the way that I was interacting with the world, I was going to have to change the way I communicated with it. But I couldn't figure out how. How do you actually do that? And so then, I learned the elements of right speech, and I learned how to meditate. And I thought, okay, all these things feel great, sound great, but how do you actually do this? How do you speak in a calm, kind, and helpful way? And so that became really my lifestyle experiment. How do I begin to enjoy my time here, change my relationship to suffering, and all of that? And so that's really what led me to practicing and then writing about it and then teaching around it. And, that led to trainings and workshops and books and all of those things.
It's amazing how most of us don't allow ourselves to sit with that kind of grief or that kind of event in our lives. And I mean, we never heal if we don't. Right?
Yeah.
We never, and it's healing. Maybe it's not the right word, but we never maybe can move on. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. I mean, you've worked with 70,000 people. What are some of the sort of most common communication habits people struggle with?
Well, I think one of the communication habits people struggle with is just having a difficult conversation, right? There's a lot of fear around expressing something that might be difficult for the other person to hear, or expressing a need or a want, and really fearing the other person's reaction. And so a lot of the challenge is learning that we are wired to react. That is our nature. And so the other person is going to react. It's just something we need to become okay with, right? That they are going to have a reaction. It might be a good reaction. It might be a bad reaction, but we're the ones attaching meaning to the reaction. So if we can just see it as we're gathering information, and we get to see if, what we're asking, if that's possible to do. If we're asking, maybe it's not possible to do, then we just have information that then we can choose from there what's next in our, in our conversations or moving forward. So one piece is really just being able, the fear around expressing the self is a big one.
Yeah, I think that's so true. You talk a lot about inner dialogue, and that's a sort of a dear subject to me, because I have a new book coming out basically about inner dialogue and how it actually impacts leadership and teams, and sort of all the business measurements and things that we talk about a lot. And I'm wondering for you, one of the interesting things about our internal dialogue is how it impacts, external relationships. Talk about that a little bit, because I think we don't often think about how our own self-talk impacts how we show up, impacts how we talk to people, impacts how we, like you said, when we get information, how we react to it.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating, and I don't think we give it enough thought in our own lives, really, in terms of our own communication.
I agree 100%. And I think it really is the foundation of most everything. I often say that the way that we communicate with ourselves dictates how we communicate with other people. And if we are talking to ourselves in an unkind and hurtful way, or in a way that, is unhelpful or creating more anxiety, doubt, worry, fear, then the lens through which we are expressing ourselves or connecting with others is going to come from that place. Our language is going to reflect those, those thoughts that we're saying to ourselves, or the way that we're talking to ourselves. And, it changes our behavior completely. There's that idea that, one person can look out the window and it's raining, and they say to themselves, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful rain I've seen. It is helping the farmers. It is, nurturing the land. And then someone else looks out the window and they see the rain and they're like, oh, this is the worst day ever, right? So both of these people are going to go out into the world, and their interactions are going to be dependent on the way they talk to themselves about the weather, right? So it affects us greatly. And I think that it's so important to start with how you're talking to yourself, because if you are talking to yourself in a way that is unkind and unhelpful, then you're likely going to be stuck in the same types of conversations. But if you are refocusing your attention to connect with yourself in a kind, honest, and helpful way, then you're going to have more of those conversations that move you forward as opposed to ones that keep you in the same place.
How did you conquer yours? Or conquer is not the right word, because I don't think you conquer it. I think you train your mind, you train yourself to have it be more helpful, as you said. Right. How did you do that for yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It doesn't ever go away. It just gets quieter, right? So for me, I have a very clear process that I do and that I share with other people, but it really is, you begin to notice your self-talk, right? You start to pay attention to the way that you're talking to yourself. And if you're talking to yourself in a way that causes more stress and anxiety or, concern, you're going to just notice it and you're going to be like, oh, hey, right? You're like, you end up just talking to it. You're like, oh, hey, I see you. I know why you're here, right? You're here because you've always been here and you've helped me along the way. This voice inside has gotten me to these places. But, right now I'm in a different place in my life and this isn't helpful for me right now. So I'm just going to ask you to, step aside so that I can go in this direction. And then it's a matter of just moving myself into how do I want to feel instead, and, talking to myself in a way that is objective, not like rah, rah, shish, boom, bop, but, very much more in a kind way, right? In a more gentle way.
What I realized was that it's not a fight, because that voice is there to protect you. It's there to keep you safe. So it's not a bad thing, and it's not something to try to fight it. It's to say I love the way you frame that. It's like changing the tone of the conversation.
Yeah.
It's not a fight. It's a, hey, I get it, but I need you to, like you said, I'm going to go and do this.
Yeah.
And I need you to help me, in that way.
Yeah.
So I love that.
I also believe that it isn't, like you said, it's not, we're fighting against it. It's actually, it is a part of us, right? And oftentimes that voice is a younger part of us from a period in time that had felt a lot of those things. And so in that moment, you're really just acknowledging another part of yourself and you're just letting it know, I've got this now. You don't really have to take the responsibility. I've got the reins. And then it begins to feel seen and heard. And so then it's like, okay, I'll be quiet now. But it's a process.
Oh yeah. I mean, you let it say its piece and then you tell it what you're going to do.
Yeah.
How does your training program offer, or how's it different? How's your offer different than, say, sort of normal communication coaching? And I mean, I coach, I'm an executive coach. And so I do a lot of coaching around self-talk and how you're communicating to your team or your, about your product or whatever it is. How is your program different, you think?
Yeah. So I think my work differs in that the basis and foundation of my work is really rooted in mindfulness and meditation practices. And it really is more of a practice of communicating. So you're changing the way you communicate by learning a new practice of communication. So you're starting to unlearn a lot of your default patterns of communicating and replacing them with new practices and new tools. So it's not it's not like a course on speaking or a course on listening. My work is really rooted in the idea that communication begins in the body. So we really we have to understand our nervous system, and we have to learn how to work with our nervous system in challenging conversations before we can learn actually how to express ourselves, before we can learn to listen. So a lot of times I liken my work to, it's like the piece before the other communication courses out there. It's kind of like the prerequisite for those other communication courses to actually stick and be impactful.
What is, what are some results that you've seen, or are there some victories, some transformational moments from your students, or stories you can tell us that they've told you that of how this sort of changed somebody's life, or changed an outcome that, you must have some really good stories of how people change and how they, it really helped them progress in their lives. You have a couple of those stories?
Yeah. I mean, there's many. I think, a story that I love is just the story of, like a woman who was having a very hard time communicating with her family. She hadn't talked to her family in about 4 years. And through the work that we did together, being able to come back into the family dynamic and to be able to have conversations where before it was impossible to have. And, I just spoke with her the other day, and she just went on family vacation, which is something that she never thought she would have been able to do, 4 years prior. So that to me is a big celebration and a big success. Others, are within the workplace. There's a lot of people in, executive level positions, or those who, run schools, who before had a very challenging time standing in front of, the parents or board members and expressing themselves without getting kind of scattered or going forward, then pedaling back, and then being able to really ground into the moment, feel the confidence within them to be able to express themselves authentically, not have a script necessarily that they're following, but trusting that the words are there, and then being able to, give over to them. And just the confidence that I see building in those moments is really, really powerful. Right. Yeah.
So what are some ways, let's do this. I've got 2 questions left. So I wanted to ask you first, about the book. What are like 2 or 3 takeaways you want people to have from the book, and sort of describe those real quick, and then I want to ask you where people can find it, and I also want you to tell us about the courses and the work that you do, like how people can join in, and maybe when the next class is, or the next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So from the book, I would say that, the key takeaways are really, this is your in the moment practices for being able to handle challenging situations. So you're in a tough conversation, and the first piece is really paying attention to that sensation. And then you're just going to grab one of the practices from the book, try it out, see if it works. And the pause itself is very small. We're not talking like a 5-minute pause. We're talking, seconds of a pause. And all of the practices in here are very subtle, so people aren't going to notice that you're doing these practices. And it's not like a theory book. So if you just want to know how to do this stuff, that's what it's for. So I would go out and grab it for that. And you can grab it anywhere. So it's online, Amazon, bookshop.org,
All the places.
All the places. And, if you go to your local bookstore and it's not there, you can ask them and they will order it, I'm sure. And it just was released on audio. So the Audible version is out as well. So that's
fantastic.
Good. Yes.
Fantastic.
And then in terms of, finding me, you can go to cynthiakane.com, and there you can learn more about me and my work and my training program. I do also one-to-one work. I have a new training program that's going to be starting in September. And that is really like the, 15-week training program. It's live with me. So it's group and one-to-one, and it's really learning how to become more clear, concise, conscious with your language, how to express yourself clearly, and how to become less reactive in, difficult interactions. So,
and we have a lot of business owners and businesses that listen. I'm guessing that you also will come in and speak to a group.
Yes. So I come in and speak. I do workshops and things like that. I do all of the things. So if you're interested, reach out. I'm here. And the other piece too, I do have a newsletter as well that you can sign up for, and it's monthly practice in terms of communication. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, Cynthia, thank you. The book is called The Pause Principle, and I highly recommend that you pick up a copy and check Cynthia Kane's website. We'll put those in the show notes when we go live. And Cynthia, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and thank you for watching and listening to Bestseller Live. And we'll see you next week.